Call to order, regular council meeting. Number 1566 for August 30th. And in honor of the Lewa Tool, the Village of Pemberton acknowledges that we are meeting within the unceded territory of the Lewa Nation. Those members of the public in attendance, please note that this meeting is a live webinar and is being recorded. The recording of the meeting will be available on the village's website following the meeting. Adoption of the agenda. Are there any amendments? Seeing none, motion approved as presented. Councillor Noble, second by Councillor Craddock. Any opposed? Motion carries. We don't have any rise with the report. Number 4, approval of minutes from regular council meeting 1565 from Tuesday, July 12th. Moved by Councillor Noble, second by Councillor Zant. Any opposed? Motion carries. Remember your names. Any business arising? It's been a while. Any business arising? None. No business arising from committee of the whole, no committee minutes, no delegations. So we go on to number 9, staff reports. 9A is to the CAO. It's Tracy.
Thank you, Mayor Richmond. So just a few things to report. On July 21st of 2022, the village received correspondence that the Agricultural Land Commission has refused the application for the non-farm use on the lands at 1641, formerly known as the Adventure Ranch. We're still waiting to hear from the landowners as to other proposals as what they would want to pursue. And as you may remember, this request was to construct an RV park on that property, and it was requested by council to go through the ALC. The ALC application was denied because the proposal did not align with farm use.
No.
In other news, we were successful on the UBCM Grant Housing Needs Report Program application for $15,000.
And which was that for?
That was for the UBCM grant for the Housing Needs Report Program.
Okay.
And unfortunately, we were not successful on the age-friendly funding grant for the OCP review. Yeah. Another progress update, the daycare RFP has been posted and is closing on September the 24th. And staff are working on the RFP for the amenity building out at the recreation fields.
If I might ask, what's the time frame on that? Has it gone out?
The RFP has not gone out.
It has
The amenity building, not yet, no. And some of that has to do with the work with our consultants. So we're waiting on some things from them. So the update on the basketball court, I mentioned before we started, but the asphalt did not cure due to the heat that we've had. So we have not had the fencing installed as of yet. The next available date for that will be September the 12th. And apparently basketball is not immune from supply chain issues. So we have yet to be able to obtain the post and the net. They are currently on back order. And with that, I will end my report.
Questions? Let's see. Councillor Zant, second by Councillor Craddock. Any opposed? Carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're on 10A, 10 bylaws. 10A is the zoning amendment comprehensive development zone 6, Sea to Sky Community Services, Howell Road Affordable Housing Project. Mr. McCray, I believe, will be presenting. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks. Are you going to be putting up the report or should I have it on screen?
I have a presentation prepared. I need to figure out how I can do that. Okay.
And then we go. Yeah, and then
We have to. Okay. I need to share. There we go. Great. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me tonight. Technical difficulties here. Apologies.
Should have on hold music.
I'd love to know. Okay, I mean, over my head, Gwendolyn.
Chad.
Okay, what I did was I started off the screen, but then I picked the present.
That's on the screen, though.
Yeah, but I can't control it, so, yeah, let's try this. Oh, yeah, let's do it.
The slideshow?
Okay. There we go. Okay, let's start again.
All right.
Presenting. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me tonight. So I'm here tonight to present to Council the zoning amendment for the Sea to Sky Community Services Affordable Housing Project at Harrow Road for first and second reading. This report is also asking Council to consider setting a date for public hearing and to establish a list of prior to adoption obligations. So Sea to Sky Community Services filed an application in spring 2022 for an affordable housing project backed by BC housing funding. The application was for a rezoning amendment and a major development permit to satisfy the village's land use regulations. On May 17th, 2022, Committee of the Whole received a presentation outlining the key elements of the application. Committee of the Whole passed a resolution recommending to Council that staff be directed to continue processing the application substantially in the form submitted. The subject property is kind of the northwest corner of Harrow Road and Highway 99. The circles shown on this diagram are indicating a 5-minute walk radius and a 10-minute walk radius. The OCB designation for this land is Gateway, which the proposal aligns with. Zoning is C2, commercial tourism, and the property is in development permit area number 7, Gateway. So as a little side note, the applicant has submitted an application for a major development permit as well, which has been processed concurrently with the zoning amendment. However, the development permit will not be brought forward to Council until after third reading of the zoning amendment. So expect that in the future. The land is currently vacant and the adjacent land uses are listed here. Here's a lovely photo of the existing site condition. And the quick brief proposal summary here. The proposal is for a 5-story mixed-use building. On the first floor is 9,000 square feet of usable space. And that's so 7,000 square feet of that is going to be space for Sea to Sky Community Services to offer programming to Pemberton residents, and 2,000 square feet approximately is intended to be leased out to neighborhood commercial uses. The floors 2 through 5 will have 63 dwelling units, ranging in size and affordability. And then the project is proposing a 19 meter building height and 79 parking stalls are proposed. This report focuses on the zoning bylaw amendment that is required to allow this project to proceed. Staff are proposing a new comprehensive development zone instead of amending the existing zone. Comprehensive development zones are well suited for projects like this, as the zone can be tailored to match the attributes of the project. Again, Council will also need to authorize a development permit, but that will not come forward until after third reading of this zoning amendment. The table shown here compares the existing zoning to the proposal. And so the zoning amendment is required, the proposed building height and the residential use being requested. This proposal has been taken in front of the Advisory Land Use Commission on July 20th, and they provided a list of recommendations, which I have summarized here. The applicant has also responded to those recommendations, which I've tried to capture briefly here as well. So in response to the ALUC's concerns about parking, the applicant provided examples of similar projects in smaller jurisdictions, smaller municipalities in BC, demonstrating that projects like this are typically approved with significantly less parking than would typically be required. Their traffic engineers have also reviewed their study and confirmed that a lack of local data is not considered to have a significant impact on their findings. So leave that there. And the applicant has also gone ahead and revised their site plans to incorporate more green space into the parking lots and identify significant trees on site, as well as add a paved multi-use pathway to align with the village's cycling network plan. The new CD zone has been crafted to meet the specific needs of this project. So here's the kind of the key points. One new definition will be added: community services nonprofit, into the general definitions in part 3 of the zoning bylaw. The new zone aligns with, the new zone allows either a community services nonprofit use or a C2 use, but not both. And so the main reason for that is that community services nonprofit uses are not a commercially viable land use on their own. And most importantly, the way this CD zone is crafted, only a proposal contemplating a community services nonprofit use may exceed the building height prescribed in the C2 zone.
Scott, can I just interrupt there just to get a little clarity on that? So it can be nonprofit or a C2 use, but not both. But isn't that what's being proposed? You got the not-for-profit, the Sea to Sky Community Services space, and then the other 2 spaces that were considered for commercial. So is it like for that actual space within the building, or is it the zoning captures the whole first floor, right? So
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so the community services nonprofit use would enable ancillary commercial uses on the ground floor. So that's not considered a concern. Essentially, if this project were to proceed or pass 3rd reading of the zoning amendment and then somehow come unwound for some other reason, and this new zone only allowed for community services nonprofit uses, that because there is no commercially viable land use otherwise, that could be considered a deemed expropriation, whereby the village has created made a zone whereby no viable land use can be done other than a nonprofit use. And we're trying to avoid concerns like that from cropping up.
thank you.
The village has, where am I here? Sorry. This report, no, sorry. Moving quickly here.
Here we are.
Yeah, this project is supported by multiple layers of village policy, starting with the OCP. So this subject parcel is within the urban growth boundary. The OCP land use designation is Gateway, which proposal in front of us, the land use is proposed. And the project aligns with 5 of the 6 housing policies stated in section 5.9.1 of the OCP. The project also aligns nicely with the village's affordable housing action plan of the 4 goals here and how the project is aligned. And the project can also accommodate the needs of the 6 groups identified in the action plan as particularly affected by housing issues in the village. So staff recommend a public hearing be scheduled for Monday, September 19th at 6:30 p.m. The thinking there is that this is a more accessible time in the evening, and should there be a large turnout at this event, this would not delay other council business on the scheduled meeting on September 20th. Lastly, staff have identified the following these actions shown as required prior to adoption of the new zoning of this zoning amendment. So discharge of an existing restrictive covenant that essentially is not relevant to the development being considered. Replacing the current flood covenant with one that reflects contemporary flood construction considerations. Creating a new statutory right-of-way for lift station 1 that allows for access and potential future expansion. And completion of a housing agreement adopted by bylaw and registered on title. So staff are recommending option 1, and which is shown here in full, and I will not quote. And so that concludes my presentation. I'm available to answer questions, and I'd also like to note that the applicant is online should council wish to direct any questions to them.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. So as I mentioned, we have Jesse Abram and Casey Clerkson, I believe, online. Before I ask you if you would like to hear from them, are there any questions specific to Mr. McCray's presentation that we'd like to ask first? Go ahead.
I might, Mr. Craig. You mentioned there'd be commercial use on the bottom floor over and above what the social service is going to use. Is that mainly for daycare and maybe church uses and stuff like that? It's not going to be for coffee shop and that, is it?
Yeah, thank you for the question. As far as I understand, the uses that will be allowed in those commercial areas include ancillary commercial uses, which I believe includes retail, things like that, neighborhood serving commercial uses. So in theory, it could be a coffee shop or something like that. I believe recreation is also allowed. So that can include a physiotherapy clinic or a yoga studio or something of that nature.
If I might, and does council have the ability to say all of those are fine, but we're not looking for another coffee shop or that type of thing in that area? Can we restrict the use of that extra space?
In theory, I believe, yes, this would be the time to change the zone to expressly prohibit uses that the community does not wish to see in this area.
As a comprehensive development, from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. McCray, we have the ability to tailor the zoning to what we see fit for the building. So if it didn't.
So right now, under the amending bylaw, permitted accessory uses would be home occupation. So if somebody wanted to have a little accounting business or bookkeeping business and they lived in that building, they would be allowed to do that, subject to, we would probably ask for building approval or organizational approval. A convenience store, office, business, personal services, restaurant, cafe, retail, recreation, and leisure. Those have been built into the comprehensive development zone.
And those are all consistent with C2, right?
Yes.
And
There are-
the ALUC comments on the use. I'm going to just give us a.
Yeah, the ALUC, I'll just bring that one up again. Essentially, the ALUC recommendation was that that this new comprehensive development zone retain the currently permitted uses in the C2 zone. So that's how we've arrived at that list of allowed commercial uses on the site.
Maybe the proponent can speak to that a little more as well, Councillor Penn.
I'm sorry.
I said maybe the proponents can speak to the.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Any other questions for Mr. McCray? Go ahead.
Can you give us a little bit more detail on the restrictive covenant?
Yeah, essentially it's a restricted covenant that was registered on title at a time when this parcel of land was expected to be developed in the same manner as the Glen. And so it stipulates a certain fee per unit that is going to be developed that would be adopted by the village. It's kind of like a precursor to a community amending contribution or something like that. Yeah, so essentially it's not relevant to the kind of development being proposed at this time.
Okay, I have another question about the electrical lines in front of the building. So on page 60, there's a diagram and they kind of fade out, but I'm wondering how the design of the building and the landscaping accommodates those lines and the setbacks that are required.
Yeah, it's my understanding, and the applicant may be able to speak to this better than I can, that they have confirmed that the building is not, is an acceptable setback from the power lines, according to BC Hydro requirements. And then, so apologies, there's another part to your question.
Right, well, just how the landscaping and building is respecting those setbacks, because right on the corner, it's showing a pretty big tree. Well, my understanding is that there would really be no screening, substantial screening on the highway side because of those transmission lines. So everything would have to be, 2 or 3 meters tall.
Yeah, anything within the, within the the required distance from the BC Hydro lines exactly would have to meet their requirements.
Right, okay, so the diagram is a little bit misleading, there won't be any trees there.
Yeah, depend, perhaps, yeah. I'm not sure exactly, I don't have the diagram in front of me, but exactly what kind of vegetation can be planted underneath BC Hydro lines will be dictated by BC Hydro requirements.
That will be something that can be discussed as part of the development permit process as opposed to the zoning.
But it could affect the setbacks, so.
Yeah, I mean, I had kind of a similar question in terms of the green buffer, in terms of whether left room to mature trees, like all mature trees. So again, I think we could maybe ask the proponents, you can get a little more answer to the question. Okay, if there's nothing else, can I get a motion to bring on the proponents to? Then Councillor Caddick, seconded by Councillor Noble. Any opposed? Motion carries. Oh, good evening, Ms. Abram and Mr. Clarkson. Thank you for joining us. You've heard a bit of the conversation. Did you want to say a few words, make a little presentation before council asks any questions? Fill in some gaps for us.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Mayor and Council, for having us here this evening. It's exciting to get to this stage. I think Scott has presented it well, and I don't think I have anything to add at this time.
Okay, could you, a couple of the questions that came about just in the conversation now, maybe you could speak to. One was about the rationale around the use of the commercial space outside of the SSCS space downstairs, what the rationale is for the use. And the other question that we've been talking a little bit about is the green buffer that goes around the project. You know, it's in the arborist report a little bit, or the landscape report a little bit, but does that buffer allow for mature trees? Is it a big enough buffer to allow for good screening and mature trees? And also in relation to the hydro lines?
Yeah, you bet. I will take the first question there, and then I'll pass it off to Casey. So for the ground floor space, we do have some square footage allocated as commercial rental space. And so the purpose of that is to provide a revenue generating source to help supplement the costs and expenses on running our programs and social services. The intent of the commercial space is to find uses or renters that are complementary. So that could include medical services, office services, administrative services. It could also include retail or some small food establishment that would support tenants or residents in the neighborhood. So we do not have any tenants allocated for those commercial spaces yet. But it is something that we've included in our business case and budget for this project.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Clarkson.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. With respect to the hydro lines, and a very good question. I think the architects, as they do the renderings, are trying to illustrate. And again, it is a rendering. It's not an exact replication, but they do the best of their abilities. Please do know that we have referred to the setbacks that are required from those transmission lines with our electrical consultants, and the building does in fact meet the required setbacks as prescribed by BC Hydro. And I've reviewed also the landscape plans, and that mature tree that's illustrated could be set forth, or it is on plan set back a little bit, so it does not interfere with the proposed hydro lines. But the point in consideration is very well taken, and we will ensure that we go back to our landscape architects to ensure, like, the hydro lines have all been surveyed, we know where they are, and we want to make sure that, of course, that we do not interfere with the transmission of those lines with future growth of the proposed trees.
And the buffer at the back, sort of at the backyards of the Boston Street residents, that buffer there is, you know, I see it on paper, but in reality, that buffer there is wide enough to allow for some good green space and good mature landscaping to provide solid
Absolutely.
greening for those residents.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. We have looked at that, and yes, there's a combination of mixed proposed plantings there that are in keeping with the Village of Pemberton's planting list, and a number of those trees will start off obviously a little bit lower, but they do grow to be quite mature trees, again, in keeping with providing privacy for the existing residents to the north, as well as the future residents of this building, and providing a nice screen between the two properties.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Councilor Zanko.
I'm just curious about on page 16, this may be more of a question for Mr. McCray, but looking at the breakdown of how the rentals will be allocated to what income people are earning, I'm wondering if council has the power to change that out.
Sure, thank you for the question through the chair. I believe that when it comes to the housing agreement, council could set certain requirements. However, I also understand that BC Housing is a fairly rigid program, and they prescribe essentially what the breakdown could be. So I think while council could, in theory, provide, you know, some sort of requirement of how they would like to see the breakdown be done, I think that the funding would be contingent on following the BC Housing program, essentially.
Thank you.
Jesse, did you want to add anything to that, or maybe just in terms of how that housing, and Scott as well, how that housing agreement will come back to council, or how much info we may or may not have on that?
Certainly, through the chair, the housing agreement is going, as shown in the option 1, is recommended to be established as a prior to adoption obligation. And so that housing agreement would come to council for consideration when the time is right. And we would at the time look to ensure we provide proper introduction, guidance, and discussion of the housing agreement with council to ensure comfort with the agreement being put forward.
Just to clarify, Mr. McCray, so, you know, today being, our focus being the zoning amendment, that piece then would come back around with the development permit as a part of the development permitting process, which council will then participate in as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's something I was going to sort of clarify as a summary point before we got into too much discussion, which is we're here today to look at the rezoning aspect, which is around the height of the building and the use of the residential use of the land and the comprehensive development. So, and that's what will be, that's what we will be giving first and second reading to, and that's what will be up for discussion at the public hearing on September 19th. If that moves forward from there, following that, through the development permit and discussion on the housing agreement, council and the community would have more ability input in some of the other aspects of the development. Is that a fair statement for council as well as anybody watching right now?
Yes, through the chair, I agree. That is a fairly good summary of the process. Mm-hmm.
Jesse, did you want to add anything, or are you good?
Yeah, nothing to add, just that the breakdown is part of the BC Housing program. And so our proposal has gotten to this stage based on that breakdown. So yeah, we would also be very agreeable to entering into a housing agreement. It preserves affordable housing in perpetuity for the community.
Yeah. Thank you. Councilor Antonelli.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful for the residents of Pemberton to see a similar example to this building. So can you think of another example of a 5-story building located 4 meters from a provincial highway right away that the residents could go look at?
That would require some research, but we could look into it.
Any other questions? Okay, see no more questions. I'll thank Mr. Cooks and Ms. Abraham for joining us. I will open it up for discussion.
So sorry. One thing is with so we're here to decide about the electronic meeting,
Say again?
the electronic meeting. So there's one question I do have about that specifically is there a limit on how many seats, like electronic seats, that people can sign up
For the public hearing, you mean?
Yeah.
So what's proposed for the format for the public hearing?
We would do a hybrid model where we take as many people as we possibly can in this room.
So we would be in this room?
We would have to be because we are not able to set up technically in any other location. And so we would offer the opportunity, it's a webinar. Webinars can take, correct me if I'm wrong, Gwendolyn, we could 100.
Thank you. There was a technical issue with the first hearing, not hearings. The component we had where a lot of people tried to.
Oh, that, yeah.
They had an invitation by invitation only. You had to pre-register, so those were public consultation sessions facilitated in a different format. So we would, it will be a link that people can click on and get into. They're not having to pre-register or anything like that.
I heard from the community that there was a lot of people that did try to register and they weren't able to get in.
Yeah, and we don't, for public hearing, we wouldn't do that. And we didn't facilitate that meeting. That was facilitated. So they use a different format. So that wouldn't be our intention.
Okay. Floor is open for comments. On what we see or, comments or move towards a motion. Let's go.
Yeah, the only comment I'm going to continue with is when we first looked at this building, which I'm in favor of, we talked about not having retail and commercial space in it other than social services and maybe daycare. And I think we talked about church services or something. So I'm having a real difficulty because a lot of the community said at that point in time, having coffee shops and convenience stores and that type of thing in the building wasn't going to be what they wanted to see. So I'm willing to support this as long as that is noted. And we'll see what comes back from the public hearing and see what kind of feedback we get on that. If maybe the community's changed their mind, in which case it's great, but if not, it's something I'm going to ask to be changed at a future date.
Okay, thank you. I would say though that my recollection has it that the commercial space was considered from the beginning as part of the project, though I don't know, maybe staff could clarify that.
It was from the start, not specifically mentioning like groceries or convenience stores and coffee shops. I think the community talked against that, so yeah. I'm looking at it.
Thank you. Any other comments? Absolutely.
Yeah, like I think we've gotten a lot of correspondence from the public supporting affordable housing, and I definitely support it as well. I don't see where we've addressed the comments from the people that have concerns about massing the building. I think we've rolled through this process without it being addressed at all, and I have some real concerns about that. I'll support it going to the public hearing, but I hope we do get a really great turnout because I think the massing of this building is problematic. I think as far as finding a 5-story building that's within 4 meters of a provincial highway right away, I think you'd have to go down to the city, I think, and maybe not even there. So yeah, major concern for me. I feel like the parking is on the low side. I'm a bit skeptical about the traffic studies that we've been getting because every development comes in with a traffic study saying it's all great, but we've been hearing in this agenda how problematic it already is. So I have concerns about that, just from the technical traffic perspective, but also from a social perspective, because I think if someone is struggling financially and they get into subsidized housing, a lack of a parking spot could keep them there. Whereas if they could have a parking spot, get a vehicle, have broader chances for employment, it could help elevate them. So these are just some of the social implications of having really parking. So that's just some of the things that I'm concerned about, but yeah, I'm happy to see this go to public hearing.
Here.
Just comment to, as everybody else, as most of the other people at the table, I do support this. I think it's a good idea. But during the public hearing, I am also curious to hear what the public would like to see in those commercial spots. Considering that this is geared to be a affordable housing. Myself, I'd like to see support services in those spots. But that childcare, mental health services, medical clinic, something along those lines. But like I said, I'm really looking forward to public hearing and see what they have to see what the people government have to say.
Likewise, I'm looking forward to the feedback from the public hearing. I do support this. It's something we need, that we've heard from the public since we ran for council, that everyone wanted for the community. I understand it's not perfect aesthetically. There's no, we don't live in a perfect world, and I think we need to make the best of the opportunities we have, for sure. And I share some of the concerns about how vehicles will get in and out without congestion, basically. We're getting to a point where we really need some roundabouts in our community, if they're small, to keep things flowing. So I'm interested to see what they've come up for those issues. And yeah, I look forward to the public feedback.
So my comments, I think 63 units in a town our size of the affordable housing laid out the way it's been laid out is a huge gift and a huge bonus for our community. Just tons of value, and I think that I'm really excited if we can provide that. I know that going into this process, an exhaustive process was done to look for different properties. There is a limited amount of properties that can house a project like this in our land base. This is the one that was landed on as the best available one, and I still think it is the best available one. Although, as Councilor Noble says, perhaps not ideal, but there is no ideal perfect property out there. With that said, I think it does represent change. A building this size on our highway does represent change. I think there's unfortunately always a give and take when we're looking at bringing this project like this with this kind of value, and there is give and take to be had. And this represents change, and I think it can be done thoughtfully and with the proper landscaping, it'll settle into our landscape. But it does represent change. A building this big will take us a while to get used to. I like the comparison of the size across the street to the lodge. It was moved closer to the highway to allow them in response to the comments from the Balsam Street residents so that they could have better sunlight and views. That's why it got moved closer to the highway. I think there's tons of examples of buildings that are built right off the highways all over the place. Is it ideal? Once again, probably not. Would I like to live right off the highway? Probably not. But I think the fact is that this is the best available space, and it's with all the value it brings, the give and take to me is a fairly obvious one. With regards to parking, I think the parking analysis and some of the comments made in there in terms of daytime versus nighttime use, the types of users, I agree there's a parking issue in the area. But I also agree with comments in the report about, the type of residents and how many vehicles they will have. I would like to see, though, I was surprised by only, I think it was 20% of the spots that are being provided are being roughed in for EVs, EV chargers. That seems like a low number to me. We're moving in a direction of electrification here. 20% is not going to cut it 20 years down the road. So I'd like to see that change. I don't know if that happens at the development permit process, or the development application process, but yeah, I think that number is too low. And we're trying to build transit and other means to get cars off the road. So I think it's compatible with that. Like everybody else, I'm anxious to hear this is again, huge value to the community, but also represents big change. So I am anxious to hear the comments from the public and look forward to sending it there. So hearing that everybody seems to be in agreement with the next steps, would somebody like to make the motion as recommended? And maybe I'll just read it out quickly for the public, if anybody's watching, and that if somebody would like to make the motion that zoning amendment, comprehensive development zone 6, Power Road affordable housing, bylaw number 936 be given first, second reading
Can we do them in separate blocks, please?
Yep, that's
Thank
the
you.
first one, so I'll get a motion on that. Councillor Noble, second by Councillor Craddock, any opposed? Motion carries. And that council set Monday, September 19th at 6:30 PM as the date and time of the public hearing for zoning amendment comprehensive development zone 6. To be held in the Village of Pemberton Council chambers and or in accordance with the village's digital meeting policy. And there's a list of, and that's, I don't know if I need to read all that.
Sorry, that's the third
You want that
recommendation.
third?
Yes,
Second?
please.
Okay, so there's a motion on the second that, Councillor Zant, seconded by Councillor Noble, discussion. Any opposed? Motion carries. And I'll read it out the last, and that is that the following obligations be completed as prerequisites to adoption of zoning amendment. Development Zone 6. First is that the applicant prepare and submit in a registrable form the discharge of restrictive covenant 24620. That the applicant prepare a revised flood hazard management study to establish the flood construction elevation and any necessary flood mitigation measures, and prepare and submit an amended flood hazard restrictive covenant in a registrable form for the satisfaction of the village. That the owner prepare and submit to the satisfaction of the village a new statutory right-of-way and accompanying survey plan for the village's pump station infrastructure. And that the owner enter into a housing agreement by bylaw pursuant to section 483 of the Local Government Act. Moved by Councillor Zant, carried by Councillor Craddock. Opposed? Carries. Is there anything else required on that? No. If not, again, I think we're all looking forward to that public hearing. The project, so thank you to the proponents. Thank you, Mr. McCray, for the presentation.
The guy before you got it.
Okay, that moves us on to 10B. This is bylaws for adoption, Village of Permanent Business License Bylaw 855, 2019. And bylaw 934, 2022, moved by. That second by Councillor Noble. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. And then Village of Pembroke fees and charges bylaw 905, 2021, amendment bylaw 935. Motion to adopt, moved by Councillor Noble, second by Councillor Craddock. Any opposed? And carries. Awesome. Thank you, Mr. McCray. Okay, quick mayor's report. Again, welcome back, everyone. Hope everybody got to enjoy a little summer break and maybe staff got to enjoy a little council break from us. Some time off. I won't bore you with all the comings and goings of my last month or so. Ministry meetings, conference calls with Lower Mainland mayors, all those sorts of things. I'll take a bit of a pause. So really just a couple meetings. The Stockholm Community Forest Board met probably a couple weeks ago now. It was our first meeting with our new administrator, Andrea Blakey, which was really great to welcome her and meet her and have her at the table. Very briefly, we discussed, had a good discussion, put some work into what the permanent board, is going to look like and how to get there. Quick summer update in terms of some of our activities. And the good news is with Ms. Blakey in place, she'll be able to put the communications together for us so we can really give a good update as to what's happening with our community forest. Everything from the business case to our approach to old growth and all that sort of thing. So more to come from Ms. Blakey and our communications on the community forest. A little outdated, but I met with the Pemberton Valley Emergency Management Committee and just near, throughout the freshettes, which seems to take really long. I feel like the freshet just ended and now we're going to start watching for the fall rains. I don't remember one that lasted that long, but I won't go. I feel like we all feel like we did pretty well considering the weird weather we've had down through the summer. Some projects that'll come up for discussion in the future, some ditching to the Arn Canal from Harrow Road, some other projects that'll come up for discussion. We had an update on the pole yard. That project's complete. And if anybody feels like popping out there, it's pretty impressive. They did a great job tying all that together. That section of dike, there's still issues with the log jam on the Birkin, which is affecting water table levels throughout Mount Currie, even into the industrial park and beyond. So that's still being looked at. But all in all, I think we did pretty well for the food pantry. Also met with the RCMP for a quick summer update with our CAO, and no stats or anything like that. It was just a quick update on the summer and busy as expected. But it seemed like a manageable busy to date, lots of activity on the highway for sure. But again, from what we're hearing from the RCMP, it's been a manageable season and they're happy with the way things are going. There was a little more discussion about the replacement of the detachment. It's been, as I mentioned before, listed as a priority, but that doesn't mean it's happening right now. Not sure if that's the definition of a priority, but so that's the priorities coming down the road. I just really bring it up to say that I keep reinforcing the fact that as they look at developing it, the timelines that it'll take to happen, and they're looking perhaps at other properties, it's going to take a few years perhaps, and in a few years we will be getting closer to that 5,000 population mark, where our relationship and our funding relationship with the RCMP changes. So I just try to keep it very live within the conversation that we would like to be informed and consulted as they look at a new detachment, because again, we're going to be picking up on that funding in a few years, and I just want to be prepared for all those conversations. So there was agreement there. And all in all, it seemed like I felt looking around, there was a good busy in town this summer. I felt like the visitation was sort of normalized a little bit. It was busy in town, but spread out. Last year, it felt like a lot of the visitation we had had really high impact. A lot of folks in the backcountry. This year was a little bit more diverse, a little bit more of a normal flow to it, and all anecdotal. But talking to some of the business owners who are still very much short-staffed in many cases. But it was a much more manageable tourism season, continues to be a much more manageable tourism season, and hopefully a profitable one for businesses. But I look forward to a little more, stats and numbers from Tourism Pemberton and the Chamber, the RCMP, just to debrief the summer. There was lots of weddings in Pemberton, holy cow, like 4 or 5 a weekend. So that's brought a lot of visitation as well. So hopefully good for businesses. But to me, again, just standing and working in town daily, it felt a little saner than last summer when folks were coming in. It was good to see busy at times and quiet down, but it felt a little bit more manageable. And lots of great activities. Most recently, we just had the Slow Food Cycle, as we all know. Again, looking forward to getting some numbers on that, but it's, again, anecdotally, it seemed like a big success to me. Holy cow, there was a lot of people in town. I'd like to know what the numbers look like. I don't know if they captured them all, but there was a lot of folks in town, but it looked like it went pretty smoothly. Again, looking forward to hearing more about it, but just tip my hat to Carly Sindrick, who's the organizer there, and Tourism Pemberton and all the volunteers for making that happen. It seemed like it was a real success to me. And more activities to come. Arts Council putting on Art Hop in the next couple of weeks. Barn Dance is coming. Lions has a golf tournament fundraiser coming up. So lots of good community events, and it's been fun to feel that again in our valley. And I just want to acknowledge a little bit of some of the good work on projects and just operational stuff from our staff over the summer months here. First of all, the landscaping, with our tight crew, I think they've done a great job keeping up with the amount that they have and the size of our crew. And I watch them out there and they move at a good pace. So I think it looks really great around town. So please pass that on. And also Public Works. The work on the channel has definitely had an effect on 1 Mile. The water is significantly cooler. I jumped in it today on the way here, and it's significantly cooler. It's great, which should clear it up a little bit more, which is great for the fish and for our use as well. So thanks to the Public Works on that. And Ms. Tracy mentioned the basketball court. Great to see that project coming along. People using the Skills Park. Our second soccer field will be open for use later in September, I believe. Lights on and ready to go, so that'll be good to see. So yeah, lots of great activities, and 5 of us have 2 months of work left to do together. So I look forward to 2 months of work with the 4 of you. And that's it for the measurables. Thank you, Council. Okay, go ahead.
Thanks very much. I volunteered for the Slow Food Cycle registration until it close up. And that closed up, the numbers that they had at that time were in excess of 3,000.
Get out of here. Holy.
Excess of 3,000, and they didn't have the final numbers yet because we were still processing people.
And is that registration or is that a counter?
That's the clicker.
It's a clicker, yeah, because I know a lot of people don't register.
Exactly. Yeah, but it went well. People coming were just, we had people that live out there that came back and said they enjoyed it so much they would like to donate, even though they live in the area. It was just wonderful to see the people coming, and there wasn't a person that came to registration when I was there that complained about anything. And when they were coming back later in the day when we're shutting down, thank you, we'll be back next year. So it was really well received. I think people were really happy to get out of, not a bad day, just a wonderful day. So it went well. The other thing with the basketball court that you mentioned, I've been informed that we're also going to put some pickleball courts in to do with that. So that's going to be advantageous for the community multi-purpose. So the basketball players will have to find another place to go, unfortunately.
We'll play for it.
Yeah, we'll play for it. Everything. You and I. I also attended the Spelkoodman Community Forest. Just a couple things that the mayor didn't highlight. The present time, they're working on building a bridge that will be next to Cedar Grove. It'll become a permanent bridge to get into that logging area. And that'll be split between the current owner of Woodlot up there. About 1/3, 2/3 for the community forest being 2/3. And in that area, there's about 1/3 of our allowable cut in that area. And very good quality timber. So when the forest fires are finished, they will start harvesting again, and the bridge is almost finished, so it's going well. The other thing that's nice to hear from the forest is the timber value is actually up a little bit over last year. And we all know last year was very substantial, so that's good. The 1 year cut is 12,660 meters has been harvested. The stumpage costs by the provincial government have gone up very high. So in BC, a lot of companies have actually shut down because of the cost. What we were informed at that meeting was the people that we deal with, the brokers, still want our product. So we can still continue to deliver this fall. So I think when we get our first financial statement, we may be surprised at the amount of money coming in. The other thing we had this summer was 2 summer students of the workforce. If you go online under the community forest, you can see what they said about their work experience, and I think it was really neat to see. So all in all, I think things are going well, and it's moving forward. I attended the Community Wildfire Resiliency Committee and have been informed that staff will be providing any updates on that meeting. So I'll leave that to them to bring forward when it's necessary. Pemberton Valley Diking District, 2 meetings this summer, one just last week. There's a lot of positives coming from there. The one negative was that Sunstone has cleaned out the retention ponds out at the recreation center. You're looking at me like you want to say something.
No, that's okay. No, we do have word that this will be given attention, and I was informed of that by Tom, and I will also be having a conversation with Kevin too. So, yeah.
Well, that's good. I'm just bringing.
And I know he's had a conversation as well with Stone.
And I'm just bringing you a report from the Diking District that they're concerned because if we get a rain event before it's cleaned out, it's going to be a major concern for them. The water levels out of Grandmother Slough are been brought up to the normal level now, so that's been fixed up with the new culvert and gates have been put in. Right now, they're working with Cascade Environmental for permits on Pemberton Creek. The unfortunate part is government has added a whole new layer of stuff that's required. And that's going to cause quite a bit more cost to doing it. The same with the Little sediment removal. We may have Diking may have to build a couple of more habitat channels for the fish when they're removing material. Again, another bigger cost. And they're already running at a very tough situation. There's SLRD and BOP are designing a flood simulation for a fall exercise. And the SLRD, I think, is spearheading that, so that'll be interesting to have that go through. They're also looking to potentially bring on a new field person. So they're looking at job descriptions and how that's gonna meet out in the 2023 budget. They've also been meeting with the bylaw and planning group to provide comment on an update to the bylaw governing future development and subdivisions of land regarding drainage purposes, so that they have some input in on that. And there's some crown land out on one of the corners that when it was originally surveyed was done apparently improperly. So they're now working with the owners and the Viking district that's going to be resurveyed to see actually if we're on their property or how it goes, because a lot of that land has been accreted. As the river moves, they get the land. So there's some changes going on there, and the Viking district cost, and they're sharing it with the people that own the properties, is going to be $9,000. And that wasn't budgeted in this year's budget, so costs just seem to be going up every time I attend a meeting. Maybe I shouldn't go in. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? What's that?
Yeah, quick update from the library. They've got their new doors installed. We're very happy with those. I attended the PVIS meeting in July, which seems like a long time ago now. The only thing that came up within the PVIS meeting was the renewal of the fees or waste disposal. There's a slight increase in the fees, but only to just fees provide services to community at reasonable costs. I'll assure you the budget expectations can be met. That was still reasonable for raising some of the fees, but it was also put on the books to have it reviewed in 1 year to see if they can be reviewed, and then look at it again in 1 year. So, and I just want to say a big thanks to all the fire crews that are out there fighting the fires. That's you can't say thanks enough to those people out there. So that's it. Thank you.
And with respect to the waste, connected to the waste anyway, another project that's coming along nicely is the new transfer station. As I've been out to the industrial park recently, that's starting to take real shape, and that's being managed by the regional district, and we're finally getting close. And it looks good, and it's going to be a big improvement. So, anyone else? Okay, let's go ahead.
Say that it's been really nice this summer to see so many events coming back, and the Slow Food Cycle was another amazing event. That was nice to see it returning. Also seeing all the amenities being well used this summer, the trail and the new bike skills park. It's been really nice. I'm looking forward to the completion of the basketball soon. And I think it's gonna be well used as well. And pickleball.
Thank you. Okay. We're on to correspondence for action 13A. First is from Melanie Helmer, Director of Strategic Initiatives from the SLRD. This is around the refuse disposal local service conversion and establishment bylaw. And the recommendation is that council gives participating area approval by consenting on behalf of the electors of the Village of Pemberton to the adoption by the SLRD, a proposed SLRD bylaw 1780/2022, Pemberton refuse disposal local service conversion. Wow, an establishment bylaw 568, a big one. Amendment bylaw 1780. Good staff. Want to add anything to that? Because I'm sure I made that sound really clear.
Very well.
Somebody like to make that motion? Councilor Gaddick, second by Councilor Zant. Any opposed? Motion carries. And then 13A2, there are 9 correspondences regarding the live share development proposal at 7340 Kyle Court. I believe hearing from staff, there might be a couple more that have come in since we put the agenda together. So we had a little conversation around it, and we want to make sure that these letters don't get lost in that they're kind of ahead of the process a little bit. We haven't seen an actual development application for this project. So some of the comments coming forward I would say, might be a little bit premature because we don't know exactly what the proposal is. But we want to make sure that these letters get captured during the process. So when an application comes forward to the next council, we want to make sure that all these get captured and brought forward as part of that development permit process. So there was discussion, and with council's agreement, we thought that maybe we could have a motion that would direct for directing all these correspondence. So something along the lines that any new correspondence received by the village regarding the live shared development proposal for 7034 Crab Apple be referred directly to staff for inclusion in the development proposal review process and presented to council at the same time the application is brought forth for council consideration. So again, serving a dual purpose of making sure that these letters are all brought forward at the right time, giving the current council the right information, and also just so that people don't feel that we're just glossing over these letters as we receive them, because we don't have a response to any of these right now because we don't have an application. So I don't know if there's any discussion on that or any questions, or if somebody would like to make that motion. Go ahead.
I just had a comment. I think, by the volume of letters and the range of points that they bring up, I think they're all really valid. And I understand where the complaints are coming from. And I do think that council has to be careful about compounding existing problems. And so, I just think I want the public to know that I think these comments are all really important.
I think we all think the public comments are really important. I think the idea is that they get captured when we actually have a development permit or application in front of us, so that we know exactly what we're looking at. But I definitely also take all these considerations to heart.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just speak to that, I think that by doing this way in the case of the live share, it gives us a chance to see how that works, because it would be a best practice that these would be coupled going forward with the development permits, because it creates a more fair and objective process as a whole. So.
And if I might just, Mr. McCray may have something to add to this, but this development permit is also under a development variance permit element. So through the development variance permit, notification is provided to residents within 100 meters who are affected by the development variance permit. And so there will be opportunity for the whole neighborhood to again provide input and further comment at the time that council will be looking at the actual application. So that's an important element to understand, that there is going to actually be an opportunity for public input through the development variance permit process.
Yeah, and just add maybe a little more clarity to that where we're at. I mean, again, we've only looked at a very, very high level at this proposal, it's not an application, as to whether it be something that could be entertained. And council said, staff, go ahead and work with the proponent, see if it comes forward. We all, I think, voiced concerns over parking at the time, but we're interested in seeing the concept discussed and to see if it's appropriate. But in this way, chase the comments, those elements will all be available to be spoken to by the public as we move forward.
Sorry, if I could just say, there's sort of two elements to this. We'd like to acknowledge the correspondence that we have received with the recommendation that is before council in the agenda package. And then a second recommendation that is relevant to all future correspondence on this particular development, so that we'll just direct them to any correspondence that come in right to staff immediately. So there's sort of two, it's worded similarly, but there's two kind of different directions, if I may.
So I'll move the recommendation on the council agenda.
And that is a correspondence
From residents who have provided comment respecting live share being incorporated into the development proposal review process.
moved by Councilor Craddock, seconded by Councilor Noble. Any further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries.
And then the second one, directing future correspondence.
So the second would be that any new correspondence would be referred directly to staff for inclusion in the development proposal review process and presented to council at the time the application is brought forward for council consideration. Councillor Zamp, second by Councillor Noble. Any further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Here we have 4 correspondence for information. Would anybody like to pull any out? Councillor Zamp?
B4. I just want to have a quick discussion about that, please.
Okay. Anybody else? Somebody like to move receipt of 1 through 3? Councillor Craddock, seconded by Councillor Antonelli. Any discussion? Opposed? Motion carries. B4, go ahead, Councillor Zamp.
Well, it just talks about the government of Canada announced an investment of 14 billion over the next 8 years for public transit. I'm wondering how this works into our kind of words. Our working towards regional transit. Can this help us, or can we dedicate some staff time to talking to the MP about this? Just in my mind, this seems like this aligns with what we've been trying to do for quite a few.
Well, we're working more with the province in terms of providing that regional transit, but the federal government has said over time that they would have some funds available to support transit in general. Most of that comes in the form of infrastructure, funds for infrastructure rather than operational. And this is a consultation leading to hopefully more of that funding. This is about the consultation. So my answer is hopefully yes. But remains to be seen, and it will certainly be considered by staff as we work towards.
Thank you very much.
Yes, my move receipt. Seconded by Councillor Noble. Any opposed? Motion carries. Decision on late business. We have none. Notice of motion. Question period. Regular council meeting is now open for questions from the public. Please be reminded that only questions directly related to items discussed during this meeting are permitted. If any members of the public attending via Zoom webinar wish to ask a question, please click on the raise hand feature in the webinar controls. This will notify village staff that you would like to ask a question, and staff will unmute your microphone when it's your turn to speak. Kennedy. Questions from the crowd? Up from the gallery. Come on, one.
Very nice. I'm glad to see you're all back.
Oh, thank you. Here. Feel good. All right. In camera, we have.
We don't need to have it if you don't want to.
Anybody want to go on that reason? Okay, so 19 Roger report. We have none. I will look for a motion to adjourn the regular council meeting. Councillor Craddock, second by Councillor Noble. Any opposed? We're adjourned.